So, as mentioned before, one of the largest drivers behind this increased investment in corporate social responsibility is greater awareness about the state of the natural environment. And before I go any further, I want to say that our intention with this course is not to preach about social and environmental issues. However, it's really important to provide insight on the scale of these issues to illustrate why so many feel compelled to action and why companies face boycotts for not having a good environmental reputation. So I'm going to just give a few facts and figures here. First, pollution is at an all-time high. There are five types of pollution that typically affect our environment: air, water, soil, noise, and radiation. I'm going to focus this slide just on a few statistics about plastic pollution and its impact on water and land, but the statistics related to each form of pollution are just as astounding. So with plastic, there is enough plastic pumped into the ocean every year to cover every inch of coastline with 5 plastic bags. That's about 18 billion pounds of plastic waste that is flowing into the oceans every single year. In addition to that, about 40% of all plastics that are ever produced are intended for one-time use. And only about 9% of all plastic ever made has been recycled. So while we develop a lot with the intent of recycling, very rarely, less than 10%, does it actually end up being recycled and repurposed. This issue of plastic waste is also not one of past generations. Nearly half of all plastic ever made was manufactured since the year 2000. There's also a huge dichotomy between North American and European treatment of plastics. Shoppers in the United States use an average of about 1 plastic bag every single day per resident. In Denmark, the average is 4 plastic bags over the course of a year per resident. And few would argue that the Danes have a lower standard of living than North Americans, especially since their GDP is about $10,000 a year higher per capita than in Canada. So changing actions to reduce your environmental footprint does not necessarily come at a cost. In addition, deforestation rates are unsustainable right now. Deforestation has left the planet with about 15% less, or 15% of its original forest cover, and it's going to take concerted reforestation efforts to reverse this. Additionally, there's a 7 billion net loss of trees, or about 33% of all trees that are cut down are replanted. That's a very, very low number, and a study was published in Science this year, which basically indicates that planting trees will be the most cost-effective means of tackling the climate crisis, and the International Panel on Climate Change has also agreed with this sentiment. In addition to that, biodiversity right now is at very, very great risk. 60% of all mammals, birds, fish, and reptiles have been lost since 1970, and each of these species plays an incredibly important role in ecosystem maintenance. So with the increase in global warming, pollution, deforestation, biodiversity is threatened, and it's a compounding threat with each of these. Billions of species are going extinct all over the world, and some scientists, in fact, are arguing that we're at the beginning of a sixth mass extinction right now, which poses issues not just for the planet and for animals, but for ourselves as well. According to the WWF, we've wiped out this many animals, 60%, and if there was a 60% decline, just for comparison's sake, in human populations, that would be the equivalent of emptying out North America, South America, Africa, Europe, China, and Oceania. Freshwater resources are also compromised. So while many parts of the world face major challenges due to limited freshwater availability, a significant amount of the limited freshwater resources in the world are actually now contaminated by pollutants from industry, from farming, fertilizers, energy generation, and other industrial activity. Every year, 1.2 trillion gallons of untreated sewage, stormwater, and industrial waste are dumped into U.S. waterways. And according to the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, approximately 40% of the lakes in America are now too polluted for fishing, aquatic life, or swimming. And in developing countries, the situation is even worse. Last, Climate change. Why should we care about climate change? I do agree that climate change can be a natural process. In fact, it has been throughout history. We know that our planet has experienced significant climate change events. So why now should we be concerned about climate change that's kind of taking place right now? If it happened naturally in the past, what's the big deal today? Especially since in the early Cretaceous period, it was warmer than today, and life thrived in regions like the interior of Antarctica that are definitely uninhabitable today, at least for most species. I guess one misconception about the threat of climate change has to do with the absolute warmth of the Earth. It's not really, yeah, I think the fact that the Earth is just warming that's an issue. It's about the rate of warming. It's the rate of change that has climate scientists, botanists, and biologists concerned. Living things, so including humans, can easily adapt to substantial changes in the climate as long as those changes take place gradually, ideally over many thousands of years or longer. Adapting to changes that are taking place on the time scale of decades is far more challenging. So on this slide above, I selected some very recent statistics from NASA on measurements they've made over the last few decades. While these measurements may sound insignificant, let me put it into perspective. Let's just open this up. So the increase in CO2 that led to the thaw after the last ice age was a smaller increase than the present time jump in carbon dioxide parts per million that we're experiencing right now, which have raised CO2 levels from the pre-industrial value of about 288 parts per million to about, right now it's about 420 parts per million. In the last ice age, that global warming had carbon dioxide concentrations of about 180 parts per million. So this is a pretty big jump that we're experiencing right now. Human civilization and natural ecosystems can adapt. Many species were able to survive the last ice age. However, the majority of life did go extinct, as most species were unable to adapt to changes. So we're experiencing it right now, and we're really testing the limits of human ingenuity and human adaptability. That's a pretty risky game. Here's some statistics on changes in the environment from NASA. But yeah, basically experiencing about a 1.9 degree increase in temperature, decline of almost 13% per decade in Arctic ice. Ice sheets are being reduced on the scale of billions of tons, and sea levels are known to be increasing right now. This has to do both with the reduction in ice cover, ice melting, filling up the oceans, but also as water heats, it expands as well.